My stepmom thought she'd get my grandpa's fortune. She forgot one thing. When my dad died, I was 16. He had always promised he'd make sure I was taken care of, and he did. He left me a small investment account and a cabin on a lake that had been in our family for decades. Less than a year later, my stepmom somehow convinced me that signing a few estate papers would make everything easier. I was grieving. I trusted her. By the time I realized what I'd signed, the cabin was gone. The investment account had been drained, and every time I asked about it, she'd say, "Your father wanted me to manage everything. Someday you'll understand." I never did. The only person who never stopped believing me was my grandfather. He was my dad's father, and he never liked my stepmom. He never made a scene about it, but every Christmas he'd quietly ask me, "Is she treating you right?" I'd always lie. "She's trying." The truth was, she made it painfully clear I wasn't family anymore. Pictures of my dad slowly disappeared from the house. She turned my old bedroom into a craft room before I even graduated high school. When I left for college, she didn't even come to help me move. My grandfather did. He showed up with coffee, a truck full of boxes, and hugged me so tightly I cried for the first time in years. He became my safe place. Every Sunday we'd eat breakfast together. He'd tell stories about my dad, show me old family photos, and remind me that grief doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. When Grandpa turned 86, his health started declining. That's when my stepmom suddenly became the devoted daughter-in-law. She visited every day, brought expensive meals, posted photos online about cherishing family. She even started introducing herself to his doctors before I arrived. It all felt rehearsed. One afternoon, I walked into Grandpa's room and heard her whispering, "You know, Harold, you've worked your whole life. I'll make sure everything is handled after you're gone." She stopped talking the second she saw me, then smiled. "Oh, we were just discussing paperwork." Grandpa looked at me and gave the tiniest wink. That should have been my first clue. Over the next few months, she became obsessed with his estate. She'd ask questions that made my stomach turn. "Do you think it's fair for young people to inherit so much money? I've sacrificed so much for this family. I'll take care of everything after you're gone." Grandpa would just nod politely. Sometimes he'd even agree with her. I couldn't understand why. Then one afternoon he asked me to drive him to his attorney's office. No explanations. Just, "I'd like you to come with me." Inside, the attorney handed Grandpa a folder. Grandpa smiled and slid it toward me. "I wanted you to know exactly what's happening." He had rewritten everything: his house, his investments, his classic truck, his watch collection, his military medals, even the cabin. Everything was going to me. Then he showed me one last page. It was a notarized letter. In it, Grandpa explained exactly why. He wrote about how he'd watched me lose my father, how he'd watched me lose my inheritance, how he'd watched me be pushed out of my own family. He never mentioned revenge, only love. His final sentence still makes me cry. "My granddaughter has already paid for this inheritance once." 6 months later, Grandpa passed peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was beautiful. My stepmom cried louder than anyone. She kept saying, "Harold always told me I'd take care of everything." Then came the reading of the will. She walked into the attorney's office smiling. Actually smiling. The attorney began reading. 5 minutes in, her smile disappeared. She interrupted. "There must be another page." "There isn't." She looked at me. "This isn't what Harold promised." The attorney calmly reached into his file. "There actually is one more item." He read Grandpa's letter out loud. The room became completely silent. When he reached the line, "My granddaughter has already paid for this inheritance once," my stepmom's face went white. She stood up. "Accused me of manipulating an old man. Threatened to sue." The attorney simply smiled. "We anticipated that." He opened another folder. Inside were years of documented meetings. Medical evaluations confirming Grandpa was mentally sharp. Signed videos explaining every decision. Witness statements. Everything. A few weeks later, I drove to the old lake cabin, not the one my dad left me. That one was gone forever. This was Grandpa's cabin. As I unlocked the front door, I noticed something hanging on the wall. It was a framed photograph of me, my dad, and Grandpa fishing together when I was 8 years old. Taped to the back was one last handwritten note. "Home always finds its way back to the people who love it."